これって前に言ってた。
Yuki is an ugly deaf girl who's crushing hard and low-key wants her cheeks clapped by some BTS lookalike, but she's totally clueless that her boy best friend is also trying to clap her cheeks. However, before any of this, Yuki, a deaf girl, was heading home on the train when some random dude pulled up trying to say something.
外国人？なぜ？
But with her condition, she had no clue what he was on about. Luckily, a boy who looked like one of those BTS members stepped in to help the guy out. As they vibed, Yuki couldn't shake the feeling that she'd seen him before. Then it hit her. She remembered him from college in her friend Rin's class. After the stranger dipped, Yuki thanked the boy and they started chatting. They found out they went to the same college, and before they split, he told her he'd see her around. The next day at school, Yuki showed Rin a pic of the boy and asked about him. Rin's face lit up as she spilled his name was Itsuomi. Curiosity was piqued, and Rin confessed she had a crush on him too and has always wanted to see his meet. But here's the twist, Rin also had a thing for Itsuomi's boss. So they cooked up a plan to grab food at Itsuomi's workplace, hoping to run into him. That night, they rolled up to Itsuomi's spot and found him grinding away. His boss, who was also his cousin, showed up and Rin was hyped to chat with him.
酒飲む?
Meanwhile, Yuki was left wondering who all these other customers were, chatting with Itsuomi like they were besties. As they were about to bounce, Rin snagged Itsuomi's boss's Insta and digits, but Yuki didn't get the chance to ask Itsuomi for his. As they were heading out, Rin tried to pass Yuki her number, but Yuki was too slow. Itsuomi offered to walk them home, and Rin jumped at the chance, suggesting he walk Yuki home since she lived nearby. On the way, Yuki finally got the guts to ask Itsuomi for his digits. He happily handed them over, and they started texting. Yuki's excitement hit the roof when he said he wanted to enter her world and see her plots. The next day, Yuki linked up with Rin at a cafe and they dived into a convo about last night's events. But their chat got interrupted when they spotted Itsuomi chatting with some girls at a nearby table. As he got up to leave, Yuki jumped up and Rin called out to him. Itsuomi walked back over to Yuki and she found out he was heading to Laos.
こんなんしねえの?
After he said his goodbyes and dipped, Yuki returned to the table where Rin was waiting with a teasing grin. Rin started clowning Yuki, saying she was head over heels in love and that she really wanted her cheeks clapped by him. Yuki denied it, insisting it was just a crush, but before they could keep the convo going, Rin pointed out Yuki's childhood friend Oshi staring at them from across the room. Yuki turned to look and Oshi pulled up, asking about the guy she was talking to earlier. After Oshi walked away, low-key ignoring her, Rin commented on how cool it was that Oshi knew sign language. Yuki agreed, adding that he always had a bit of a mean streak when it came to her. Just then, Yuki's phone buzzed with a text from Itsuomi, and she couldn't help but blush. Rin noticed and playfully poked her cheeks. Yuki asked Rin how she could tell if it was love or just a crush, and Rin replied that she had to decide for herself. Meanwhile, Oshi ran into his friend Izumi after helping a deaf guy understand that the security guard was calling him back. Izumi was impressed by Oshi's kindness and mentioned that she'd never seen him use sign language with anyone except Yuki. As Yuki walked home from school, she couldn't help but wonder what Itsuomi was up to in Laos. Her curiosity was soon satisfied when she got pics of him surrounded by kids, and she felt a pang of envy. She wanted to know what it was like to travel the world and experience new things. Itsuomi told her good night promising to see her at college the day after tomorrow. The next morning, Yuki spotted Itsuomi across the road and waved enthusiastically until he noticed her. To her surprise, he signed "Good morning," leaving her wondering when he'd learned sign language. When they met up, Itsuomi handed her the souvenir he'd promised, and she scribbled on her notepad that she loved it. Later that day, Yuki rushed to the cafe to fill Rin in on the latest tea, but she found her chatting with her friends. Instead of interrupting, Yuki decided to peep from a distance, curious about what they were discussing.
盛り上がってる。いろいろItsuomiさんのこととか話したいけど。
Just then, someone tapped her on the shoulder. It was Oshi, who signed to her what Rin and her friends were talking about. But before she could respond, someone bumped into her, and she turned to find Itsuomi, who gave her a friendly pat on the head before walking off to a table. Oshi raised an eyebrow, warning her to be careful around him, saying he might just be one of those hot guys who just wants to see her plots. Meanwhile, Rin's friends noticed the sign language and thought it was adorable. Rin rushed over, recognizing Oshi, who then dipped. She then taught Itsuomi how to sign a certain word before turning to Yuki and declaring that the convo they'd had about love and crushes, it was definitely love. Yuki and Rin stopped by Itsuomi's workplace again, and Yuki pulled out a guide to sign language, handing it to Itsuomi since he'd expressed interest in learning. He thanked her, but as he flipped through the pages, he confessed that the drawings were too complicated and asked if she could teach him in person instead.
直接教えて、ユキ。ユキがよく使う手話は何？
Yuki agreed, and just then, the door swung open and Itsuomi's friends, Shinshi and Emma, walked in. Shinshi tripped over his own feet and face-planted into the counter, prompting Emma to rush to his side. Yuki couldn't help but stare at Emma, who looked stunning with her silky hair. Meanwhile, Shinshi was checking out Yuki, telling her she looked like a model and offering to do her hair.
そうだな。ショートも良さげだし。
Itsuomi intervened, leading them to their table, and Yuki wondered how well he knew these friends. Itsuomi's cousin Kyoya filled her in. They were classmates. But before they could catch up, Rin reminded Yuki that her mom was waiting for her at her apartment, so they had to take off. As they said their goodbyes to Kyoya outside, they noticed Emma clinging to Itsuomi through the window. Yuki asked if they were clapping each other, and Itsuomi assured her they were just friends, adding that he didn't think there was any chance he would even consider seeing her applause. As Itsuomi called out to Kyoya, he mouthed a warning to Yuki to be careful, making her wonder what he meant. Days turned into weeks, and Yuki hadn't heard from Itsuomi or seen him around. She wondered if he was off on another adventure, and her curiosity got the better of her. She grabbed her phone and shot him a text, asking where he was. Itsuomi replied that he was at the laundromat and asked if she wanted to meet up. Yuki didn't hesitate, throwing on some clothes and rushing out the door. But as she was hurrying to the laundromat, she bumped into Oshi, who raised an eyebrow at her late-night escapade. Yuki brushed him off, saying she was meeting someone, and Oshi instantly knew who it was, the silver-haired guy. He warned her that Itsuomi just wanted to see her plots and then dip, but Yuki wasn't having it. She finally arrived at the laundromat, where Itsuomi was waiting for her. He handed her a drink and they sat down together. Yuki started teaching him more sign language, her hands moving rapidly as she demonstrated the signs. Itsuomi grabbed her hands, pulling her close, and Yuki's heart skipped a beat as she looked up at him. She quickly pulled back, making him chuckle. As they walked out of the laundromat, Yuki asked about Emma, and Itsuomi assured her they were just friends and he didn't have a girlfriend. He then asked about Oshi, and Yuki filled him in on their childhood friendship. They promised to meet up again soon, and Itsuomi walked her out. Back at his apartment, Itsuomi found Emma waiting for him, clinging to him in the elevator as she asked about a sleepover.
止めてって意味わかるでしょ
He extricated himself, telling her to make herself at home, and then promptly walked out again. Emma was furious, but her anger turned to curiosity when she spotted the sign language guidebook on the table. Yuki was lounging on her bed admiring the coin Itsuomi had given her when she got a text from Rin inviting her and Itsuomi to go shopping with her and the boss. She agreed, looking forward to a fun day out. Meanwhile, Itsuomi was crashing at Kyoya's apartment, trying to avoid some unwanted visitors. The next day, Yuki got ready to head out, feeling excited about the shopping trip. Elsewhere, Emma was texting Shin, venting about Itsuomi ignoring her after she gave him the green light to hit and finding out that he was learning sign language. Yuki, meanwhile, was hoping to avoid running into Oshi again as she boarded the train, but of course, he was the first person she saw. She asked where she was headed, and Yuki lied, saying she was off to the library. He started grilling her about her whereabouts the previous night, and Yuki realized how immature he was being. He stood next to her, patting her hair, and then sat down beside her, resting his head on her shoulder. When the train stopped, Oshi followed her out, calling her out on her lie. Just then, someone bumped into Yuki and she stumbled, but Itsuomi caught her just in time. She glared at them, accusing her of meeting up with Itsuomi behind his back. Itsuomi covered her eyes, which only made Oshi angrier, telling him not to approach her from behind and never to cover her eyes because she needed to see. Itsuomi just smiled, saying she'd given him permission to do so. She shot Itsuomi a dirty look and stormed off, leaving Yuki feeling a bit awkward. Meanwhile, Kyoya and Rin were waiting for them in the car, chatting about Yuki and Itsuomi's budding relationship. Kyoya asked Rin if she thought Yuki was planning on getting clapped by Itsuomi, warning that she didn't want to see her get hurt since Itsuomi was more focused on his studies. Rin countered, asking what made Kyoya think Itsuomi didn't see Yuki differently. Just then, Itsuomi walked up to the car holding Yuki's hand and helped her in. He even fastened her seatbelt, making Rin and Kyoya exchange shocked glances. At the store, they were even more surprised when they heard Itsuomi calling Yuki with such affection. Yuki noticed their reactions and wondered what was going on. Kyoya filled her in, saying he'd never heard Itsuomi speak to anyone like that before. This made Yuki think maybe Itsuomi had been calling her sweet names all along and they just hadn't noticed. After they finished shopping, Itsuomi offered to help Rin get closer to Kyoya. He suggested she ask Kyoya to go for a drive with her, and Kyoya agreed. As they parted ways, Itsuomi and Yuki took the train together. While they were walking, Yuki asked him out to dinner, but he declined, saying he was heading home. Just as she was feeling embarrassed, he invited her to have dinner at his place instead. Itsuomi took Yuki back to his place, letting her know that his parents were away and it was just the two of them.
今家族海外住んでるから気にすんなよ
They headed into his apartment and had dinner together. Meanwhile, Kyoya and Rin were stuck in traffic, and Oshi was dealing with a new responsibility, taking care of a dog while its owner was on vacation. As he trudged up the stairs, he stubbed his toe and cursed himself, remembering the awkward encounter with Itsuomi at the train station. Back at Itsuomi's place, Yuki was checking out his family photos and he filled her in on his little sister who lived in Germany with their parents. He asked about her family and Yuki shared that they didn't know sign language, so they communicated using phones and mouthing. Itsuomi was curious about her using her real voice with her family, but Yuki was hesitant to open up, remembering how people had teased her about her voice.
そうなんだどうやって会話してんの
Itsuomi suddenly disappeared and returned with a bag, pulling out coins from all over the world and handing them to Yuki. Then he donned a wooden mask, scaring her half to death. But instead of getting upset, Yuki burst out laughing, and Itsuomi was taken aback, surprised to hear her voice. She quickly stopped, realizing what she'd done, and the moment turned a bit awkward. Itsuomi gets a call from Kyoya, asking if he's walked Yuki home yet. He lets her know that Yuki's actually still at his place. Before Kyoya hangs up, she warns him not to do anything weird. He then fills Yuki in on the situation and asks her out to dinner. Just then, the doorbell rings. It's Emma. Yuki decides to bounce, not wanting to intrude on Itsuomi's guests, but Itsuomi insists on walking her out.
そっかじゃあ送るわ
あれ 人が来るんじゃなかったのかな。
As they're heading out, Emma thanks him loudly for letting her crash at his place the other night. Completely unaware that she's being super loud since she's deaf, Emma realizes she's in trouble with Itsuomi for her mistake, as Itsuomi tries to get his house key back from her.
けど返さないといつかに面倒い女って思われる。
Yuki catches the whole exchange and quickly exits the elevator. By the time Itsumi gets out, Yuki's already made a swift getaway. Later, Shin tells Emma she's doing too much after hearing about the whole ordeal. The next day, Itsuomi asks Rin to help him set up a meeting with Yuki. When they finally meet up, he asks Yuki what's going on. She turns the question around, asking him why he's so keen on learning sign language. Itsuomi's response is simple. He wants to be able to communicate with her. Itsuomi gets Rin to set up a meetup with Yuki, and when he arrives at her place, she conveniently bounces, leaving the two of them alone. They hang out in the apartment, and just as Yuki is about to open up about her feelings for him, he gets a call from Kyoya.
分かってる。うん。
見てなかった。
After the call, he says he's got to bounce, their bar is booked, and he's got a trip coming up on Monday. He promises to make time for them when he gets back. Now, meanwhile, Yuki's mom runs into Oshi, who's walking Azumi's dog. She gushes about how lucky Yuki is to have a friend like him. Back at the bar, after the crowd clears out, Kyoya and Itsuomi have a heart-to-heart about his feelings for Yuki. Just then, the door swings open and Yuki and Rin walk in. Itsuomi asks if he can borrow Yuki for a sec, and they step outside. He confesses his feelings, saying they'd make a great couple, and he really wants to see her plots, and she's thrilled to hear it. He casually throws an arm around her shoulder,
付き合おっか。
and they head back into the bar. Kyoya and Rin raise an eyebrow, wondering what's going on, and Itsuomi drops the bomb. They're officially a thing. Their friends are surprised they didn't get a heads up, but Itsuomi just shrugged it off. Later, he offers to walk Yuki to Rin's apartment so she can hang out with Kyoya instead.
分かった。行こう。
あれ、りんちゃんは一緒じゃないのかな。
After they say their goodbyes, Shin shows up looking for Itsuomi. When they arrive at Rin's apartment, Itsuomi asks Yuki if she has a passport. When she says no, he tells her to get one so they can travel together. As they're saying their goodbyes, she starts heading up the stairs and he watches her go. Then he calls out to her, and just as she's about to open the door, he sneaks up behind her and gives her a hug. Yuki wakes up to a message from Itsuomi letting her know his next stop is Cambodia. She decides it's time to get a job and asks him for some tips, but he doesn't respond. Instead, she gets a message from Rin and they meet up to vent about their workplace. Later, when Itsuomi finally gets back to her, Yuki starts going on job interviews. Unfortunately, none of them are willing to give her a chance because of her disability. Feeling down, she's stuck in her room when Oshi texts her that his sister Neo is in town. They meet up and Neo guesses Yuki's got a crush because she's glowing.
大学一緒でしょ？こいつのことこき使っていいからね。
With Oshi translating, they chat about life, and Neo asks Yuki to teach her sign language again. Before leaving, Neo tells Yuki to stay strong. She asks Yuki if she's ever spent the night at a guy's place before, and she wonders why he's asking. He explains that he just wants to make sure no one takes advantage of her.
もっと褒めろよ。
Meanwhile, Emma's feeling pretty bummed that Itsuomi hasn't texted her back in weeks. Yuki's texting with Itsuomi, but days go by, and he goes radio silent. Then, out of the blue, he pops back up, filling her in on his latest adventures. As Yuki rides the train to college, she can't help but wish Itsuomi was by her side. Just then, her phone buzzes with a message from him asking where she is. He lets her know he's back in town and waiting for her near the college. When the train pulls into the station, Yuki rushes out to meet him. Seeing him standing on the other side of the tracks, Itsuomi mouths that he wants to give her a hug. Once he crosses over, he surprises her by sitting down and planting a kiss on her instead. She's caught off guard but super happy to see him. After their romantic reunion, Itsuomi takes Yuki out to grab some food. As they stroll through the streets, Izumi spots Yuki and does a double take, wondering who the silver-haired guy is. The couple heads to a restaurant and enjoys a meal together. After lunch, Itsuomi asks Yuki if she's cool with meeting his friend Shin. She agrees and he tells her that he'll hold her hand, so if she ever feels uncomfortable, she can just give it a squeeze.
それは耳のこと？
ここでうなずくのってなんか、せっかく大事な友達紹介しようとしてくれてるのに。
He leads her to Shin's apartment where Yuki is struck by how different Shin looks now that he's sober. Shin's curious about Yuki, and Itsuomi proudly introduces her as his girlfriend. Shin invites Yuki and Itsuomi into his apartment where he learns about Yuki's hearing disability. He's curious about how they communicate, and Itsuomi fills him in. Shin asks Yuki if she understands what he's saying, and she nods. Then he starts dishing about Emma, who's had a crush on Itsuomi since high school.
高校の時からずっと俺はいつくんを好きなエマのことしか知らないけど。
Later, the trio heads out of Shin's apartment, and as they stroll, Itsuomi teases Yuki about confusing a kiss with a hug earlier. She blushes and he laughs, promising to give her a sign if he wants to kiss her. He demonstrates and tells her to pinch him whenever she wants a smooch. Meanwhile, Shin calls Kyoya, asking if it's cool to ask Emma out now that Itsuomi is dating. Kyoya gives him the green light, saying Emma's been waiting for him and he's never gotten the vibe that Itsuomi's into her.
あ、どこかでエマちゃんはシンを待ってると思うけどな。
マジでそれはないと思うよ。
Shin invites Emma to his salon, and she reminisces about the time he did her hair on the roof in high school. He confesses that he had feelings for her back then, but she was always pining for Itsuomi. He tells her about the time he asked Itsuomi to take her out, but he wasn't interested. Then he shares a story about a girl who figured out his feelings for Emma and freaked out in front of her and Itsuomi, leading to an awkward insult. After styling Emma's hair, she's thrilled with her new look. As Shin tries to muster up the courage to talk to her, she asks if Itsuomi will like her hair, making Shin hesitate.
あのさ、
いつくん気づいてくれるか
In other news, Itsuomi, Yuki, and Rin make plans to attend a sign language camp with Kyoya. The girls head out for a shopping spree to prep for the sign language boot camp. Rin fills Yuki in on a colleague who's been asking her out for dinner.
な。辻村さんって人でね、よく仕事助けてもらってたの。
Finally, the day of the camp arrives and they drive out to the countryside, setting up tents in the bushes. While Kyoya whips up some grub, Yuki, Itsuomi, and Ron dive into learning sign language. Itsuomi can't resist bringing a frog along and chasing them around with it.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
Kyoya calls them over for food, and after lunch, Rin and Kyoya take a stroll while Yuki and Itsuomi hang back by the tent. Yuki's glued to her phone, waiting for a text from her high school friend Madoka, who promised to hook her up with a job. Meanwhile, Rin and Kyoya's walk turns into a chat about love. Rin's colleague calls, asking her out again.
そうです。好きな人います。すみません。
But she shuts him down, confessing she's already got someone special in her life. Kyoya can't help but eavesdrop on the convo. Back at the tent, Yuki and Itsuomi are having a blast playing in the river. She gets soaked and he swoops in to carry her back to the tent to dry off. Then he gives her a sly pinch and she takes it as a sign that he wants to have some plot with her. But just when things were about to heat up, Rin and Kyoya burst in, saying they need to head to the hospital because Rin twisted her ankle. As they drive back to the city, Kyoya and Rin have a heart-to-heart in the car. Rin apologizes for hurting him when she got a call from another guy, and Kyoya listens intently. They drop off Itsuomi and Yuki, then head to the hospital. Izumi spots Yuki and Itsuomi heading into a pub, and later, Itsuomi takes Yuki back to his apartment, insisting she shouldn't leave. As they're freshening up in the bathroom, he promises nothing weird will happen.
俺先シャワー浴びるから。
But then he starts stripping off his top, claiming he wants to shower. Yuki quickly pushes him out of the bathroom.
服貸してもらっちゃった。すっごいブカブカ。
Meanwhile, Izumi fills Oshi in on what she saw, urging him to man up and confess his feelings to Yuki. Itsuomi watches as Oshi calls Yuki, wondering what's going to happen next. Itsuomi hands Yuki his phone, telling her to hit him up if she needs anything. She scrolls through the messages and sees the ones from Oshi. Later, after showering, he takes her to his room and mentions that he has movie nights on his days off.
どうしよう。もうそろそろキャパオーバーだ。
They pick a flick and start watching. When her phone rings, he hands it over, and she answers a video call from Madoka. Madoka congratulates her on scoring a boyfriend and fills her in on the job she's lined up for her. After the call, they get back to the movie. As they're watching, Itsuomi steals a kiss on her hand and then on the lips. Meanwhile, Shin meets up with Kyoya at his bar and they chat about Emma. Kyoya asks Shin why he never gets upset with Itsuomi, and he explains that he cares about both Emma and Itsuomi. Kyoya wonders who's looking out for Shin's feelings, asking if they don't matter. Back at Itsuomi's apartment, Yuki and Itsuomi are sleeping in separate beds.
眠れない夜になった。けど、それでいいと思った。
She texts him, asking if that's what he meant by not wanting to rush things. He wakes up and explains that he doesn't want to pressure her because she's important to him. The next day, Itsuomi runs into Oshi and asks what he's playing at. But instead of getting an answer, Oshi throws some shade and takes off. Itsuomi decides to follow him, and when Oshi turns around, he's heated.
俺あんたのこと嫌いだし、質問の意図も読み取れねえし、気持ち悪いわ。
Itsuomi tells him he's not down to talk, but Oshi demands they meet up at 7 p.m. in front of the college, saying he'll do whatever Itsuomi asks. Even though he said he wouldn't, Itsuomi ends up sitting next to Oshi in a bar, sipping on a beer. He introduces Oshi to his cousin as Yuki's childhood friend. After getting wasted, Oshi passes out. When he comes to, he leaves some cash on the counter and takes off.
帰る。
おい、待てって。
Itomi catches up to him outside where she's struggling to walk. Oshi starts reminiscing about the first time he met Yuki and how he got into sign language. Then he reminds Itsuomi about their earlier convo where he promised to do anything he asked. So she asks him to break up with Yuki.
What the hell?
Itsuomi shuts that down, saying it takes two to break up, and he can't do it when he knows Yuki wouldn't want to. He confesses how much he loves her, and that if they hadn't met in college, they would have met some other way. She breaks down, warning Itsuomi that if he ever makes Yuki cry, he'll deal with him. Despite everything, Itsuomi still can't bring himself to hate Oshi. He ends up escorting him home since Oshi can barely walk. Yuki and Rin are chilling on a bench when Itsuomi shows up. Rin dips, leaving the two of them alone. Itsuomi notices Yuki's getting the jitters and figures it's because of her upcoming interview. Little does he know she's actually freaking out because he's standing super close to her.
今、大きくハグされたみたいに、あったかい気持ちになっている。
Itsuomi drops some German knowledge, saying he'll cross his fingers for her good luck. She heads to the restaurant, meets Madoka's aunt, and nails the interview. Stoked to have landed the job, she's walking home when her mom hits her up to grab some sauce from the convenience store. At the store, Yuki tries to pay at the sign language counter, but some dude swoops in, grabs her basket, and takes her to his booth.
お次のお客様、隣のレジへどうぞ。
びっくりした。そっち？
The problem is he's wearing a mask and she can't understand what he's saying. Just in time, Oshi shows up and saves the day. As they leave the store, Yuki wonders why she's being so nice to her, but he dips without answering. He comes back, sees her on the phone, and asks if it's her boyfriend. He warns her that if the guy ever makes her cry, he'll be there to deal with him.
あいつのこと、褒めんなよ。
Yuki's all confused, thinking, wait, why does she hate Itsuomi when everyone loves the guy? Oshi takes off, looking pretty down, leaving Yuki wondering what's going on with him. She decides to follow him and they end up walking home together. Meanwhile, Shin hits up Emma to meet and chat. Yuki starts her new job, and later that night, Shin meets with Emma, spilling the tea about Itsuomi getting a girlfriend and how he's there for her.
Emma. 座って。
Emma reminds him of something he said back in high school, and Shin claims it was just misdirection. Yuki's been missing Itsuomi since they haven't hung out in days, and then she gets a text from him saying he's outside. She rushes to the balcony, but they can't see each other's signs.
逆光だし見えづらいのか。降ります。
Itsuomi decides to bounce, but Yuki chases after him and they catch up, making plans to hang out more often. Yuki and Itsuomi's first date is a stroll through a gorgeous flower garden. She's snapping pics of the blooms and of them together, and they're having a blast.
1、
After a while, they take a break to chow down on some grub. While they're eating, Yuki asks about Oshi and Itsuomi reveals they're now BFFs. Yuki's skeptical, remembering what she told her, but Itsuomi suggests they visit him sometime. She can't help but imagine Oshi's reaction, and it's pretty entertaining. Next, they hop on a swan boat and it's all romantic vibes.
思い出すと感情をこらえなきゃいけないぐらいで。
Meanwhile, she's stuck in Saturday classes with his friends, complaining about the early morning wake-up call. But then, he starts gushing about the girl he's crushing on. One of his friends wonders if it's the girl with the hearing aid, but she doesn't spill the beans. Elsewhere, Shin's boss is curious about Emma since she's been MIA lately. Meanwhile, Yuki's cozied up in bed, reading a sweet text from Itsuomi about his German adventures and how he fell in love with traveling and learning new things. As she finishes reading, Itsuomi sends her a sneaky pic he took of her without her knowing. He tells her that their plan to meet for a few hours doesn't matter. He's cool with meeting for just 10 minutes as long as he gets to see her. The more time he spends with her, the more he falls for her. Emma, taking advice from her colleague, finally asks Shin out. It's about time she stops wasting her energy on people who don't appreciate her.